What is f of x, and why did my math teacher start talking about f of x? Hi, my name is Arif Ali, and in this short video we're going to understand why your teacher started talking about f of x. So let's get started. First of all, you've got this. In about 2 minutes you're going to know all about f of x, g of x, and anything else of x. So just bear with me as we go through some of these examples. You already probably understand that graphs on the coordinate plane are described by equations like y equals 3x plus 2, or y equals x squared, or other ones like that. So why did your teacher start talking about f of x? And by the way, let me just clarify. When you see f parentheses x, you say it just like I did, f of x. All right, so let's look at two curves. All right, I get it. These are not both curves in the normal sense of things, but let's just call them that. One's a line, one's a parabola. And you can see that each of them has an equation describing it by y equals x squared, or on the right side, y equals 3x plus 2. Now, we can also put a couple of points on the graph, and if you follow the x-axis over from the origin to number 2 and up to 4, you see that the coordinates for the red dot on this graph are at the coordinates x equals 2, y equals 4, and the green dot on the right is x equals 1, y equals 5. I just do that to show that we understand how the coordinate plane works. Now here are the same two curves plotted on one coordinate plane. You can see that the y equals x squared is the red curve and y equals 3x plus 2 is the blue curve, but everything else is the same. You have the x-axis, the y-axis, and the coordinate plane. Your 2 points are still there. And sometimes we put two curves on one coordinate plane because we want to compare them to see how they relate to each other. We could refer to these two different curves as the red curve and the blue line or something like that. But then we might have to start writing things like red y equals x squared and blue y equals 3x plus 2. And that's typically not an effective and efficient way to refer to different curves. So let's look at another way to write this. But before I get to f of x, remember that in both of these equations, the y value is a function of the x value. In other words, for y equals x squared, you have to have an x value, square it, and get the y value, and that's how you get your coordinate pair. And in this one, you have to have an x value, multiply it by 3, add 2, and then you get the y value, and then you can plot that point. In other words, you can't plot any points on the graph unless you have an x value and then calculate the y value. But also recognize that these two curves are independent of each other. The y value of one of these equations is normally going to be different from the y value of the other one. So instead of using y for every curve on the plane, we're going to give each equation a different name. The first one, f of x, will be x squared. The second one, g of x, will be 3x plus 2. And let's talk about this. You can refer to the first equation as f of x, meaning that this equation, where y is a function of x, is going to be called f, to distinguish it from the other equation. And writing it as f of x emphasizes that f is a function of x. In other words, just like y was a function of x, this function we're going to call f is also a function of x. The same thing holds true for the second equation, where we can refer to it as g of x, where g is a function of x, and it is calculated, its y value is calculated using an x value and that equation. So here we are, looking at two curves again. Using this notation, it's a bit easier to compare the two graphs. Visually, it might be easier to say, where do the blue and red curves cross each other? But in math, physics, and other disciplines, we'll often compare the curves as f of x, g of x, and other functions of x if there are more than two curves. So, switching from y to f of x, in this video, you saw that when comparing two or more curves on a single coordinate plane, it can be helpful to distinguish between them using names other than y. In all such graphs, we're usually graphing a y value as a function of the x value. So in the new notation, we refer to each function as a letter, like f, g, h, etc., followed by parentheses x to indicate that the functions all have a y value that is a function of x. I hope this video helped you understand why your teacher switched to using f of x instead of y. If this video helped you, please like it, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.